I stood on the weathered deck of my beloved beach house at dawn, clutching a manila envelope that would change everything, watching bulldozers roll onto my property, while my father directed construction workers with shocking confidence. My mother, Patricia, and brother Jake stood beside him, practically celebrating as if this was some kind of victory parade. The demolition was scheduled to begin in exactly 30 minutes. My father, Marcus, announced loudly to anyone within earshot that this worthless shack would finally be torn down to make way for a luxury development project that would actually make our family some real money for once. What they didn't know was that the documents in my hands would completely destroy their carefully planned betrayal. 3 years ago, when I was 26, my grandmother Sarah passed away and left me something that would change my life forever. Not just money or jewelry, but this beautiful oceanfront beach house that had been in our family for 4 generations. Sarah always said I was the only one who truly understood the magic of this place, the way the morning light danced across the waves and how the salt air could heal any broken heart. My father, Marcus, never forgave his mother for that decision. As a successful real estate developer in Charleston, he saw dollar signs where I saw memories. The property sits on prime oceanfront land, now worth over $2 million, and Marcus made sure I knew exactly how much money I was supposedly wasting every single day. For 3 years, I've been living here while working as a marine biology researcher, using the house as both my home and unofficial research station. The wraparound porch became my laboratory for studying water samples, and the large windows provided perfect light for examining coral specimens. This wasn't just a house to me, it was my sanctuary and my workplace rolled into one perfect package. But my mother, Patricia, and brother Jake never stopped pressuring me to sell. Patricia would call twice a week, always starting with how much she loved me, before launching into lectures about wasting the property's potential. Jake was more direct, constantly mentioning his mounting credit card bills and student loans, hinting that selling would solve everyone's financial problems. Last month, something felt different about their pressure tactics. They became more urgent, more coordinated, almost like they were reading from the same script. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator named Carol Martinez, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in family fraud cases. What Carol uncovered made my stomach turn. My father had been secretly meeting with Coastal Development Corporation for over 6 months, planning to claim ownership of my property through a forged power of attorney. He'd been telling people I was mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and needed family intervention to make sound decisions about my inheritance. The investigation revealed bank records showing Marcus had received advance payments from Coastal Development. He'd already spent $50,000 of their money creating a debt that required him to deliver my property, whether I agreed or not. Carol's surveillance photos showed Marcus meeting with corporate executives at expensive restaurants, shaking hands over contracts I'd never seen. But the most devastating discovery was a recorded phone conversation where Marcus told his business partner that his mother had been a senile old woman who never should have left valuable real estate to an unmarried granddaughter with no business sense. He actually laughed while describing how easy it would be to manipulate me into signing away my rights. For weeks, I pretended to go along with the increasing family pressure while quietly gathering evidence. I documented every conversation, saved every text message, and prepared legal documents that would protect both me and my grandmother's legacy. This morning, when Marcus arrived with the construction crew at exactly 7 o'clock, he was carrying fake documents supposedly showing I'd finally agreed to the demolition. The papers looked official, complete with a notary stamp and my forged signature. But I recognized the handwriting immediately because I'd seen Marcus practice copying my name. Tommy Rodriguez, the weathered construction foreman, seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the rushed timeline. He kept asking Marcus about proper permits and environmental clearances questions that made my father increasingly agitated and defensive. "Look, Tommy, we've been over this," Marcus snapped while gesturing toward the bulldozers. My daughter finally came to her senses and realized this old place is nothing but a money pit. The sooner we get it down, the sooner we can start building something that actually generates income instead of just sitting here collecting sand. Patricia and Jake acted as enthusiastic witnesses, nodding along with every word Marcus said. Patricia even brought coffee and pastries for the construction crew, playing the role of supportive mother to perfection. Jake kept taking pictures of the bulldozers, already posting social media updates about the family's exciting new development project. But I noticed Tommy checking his paperwork multiple times, clearly troubled by something he couldn't quite identify. When I asked to see the permits, Marcus became visibly agitated and started rushing everyone to begin the demolition immediately. "Nina, sweetheart, you don't need to worry about boring paperwork details," Marcus said with that condescending tone I'd grown to despise. "Daddy's taking care of everything now, just like I should have been doing all along. Why don't you go inside and pack up any little trinkets you want to keep before the real work begins?" That's when I walked calmly to my car and retrieved the manila envelope that would expose everything. Inside were the original property deed, with my name clearly listed as the sole owner, a digital recording device containing my father's confession about forging documents and a restraining order I'd filed just 24 hours earlier with the county courthouse. As I approached Tommy with steady, confident steps, I watched my father's smug expression begin to crumble. Marcus suddenly realized that his carefully orchestrated plan was about to unravel completely, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop what was coming next. I handed Tommy my authentic property deed and restraining order without saying a word, letting the legal documents speak for themselves. Tommy examined the papers carefully, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing the official seals and proper legal formatting that Marcus's fake documents lacked completely. "Ma'am, this here shows you're the rightful owner," Tommy said slowly, comparing my real deed to the forged papers Marcus had provided. "And this restraining order is dated yesterday, which means nobody's supposed to be doing any construction work on this property without your written permission." Marcus lunged forward desperately, trying to grab the papers from Tommy's weathered hands. "Those documents are fake. My daughter's been having mental health problems, and we're trying to help her before she completely destroys our family's financial future." But Tommy stepped protectively between us, his construction experience having taught him to recognize desperate lies when he heard them. "Sir, I've been doing this work for 25 years, and these papers look completely legitimate to me. I'm not touching any equipment until we get this sorted out properly." That's when I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording that would change everything. My father's voice filled the morning air, crystal clear and unmistakably incriminating. "The old lady never should have left that property to Nina in the first place. It's worth over $2 million, and my daughter doesn't have the business sense to maximize its potential. I've already gotten the forged power of attorney notarized, so we can move forward with demolition next week. Coastal Development is paying me $300,000 just for securing the property rights." The recording continued with even more damaging admissions. Marcus's voice described bribing city officials to rush the demolition permits through the approval process. He laughed while explaining how easy it was to manipulate local bureaucrats who owed him favors from previous real estate deals. Patricia's face went completely white as she heard her husband's recorded voice. "Marcus, you told me Nina had finally agreed to sell. You said she signed the papers willingly after you explained the financial benefits." Jake suddenly looked sick to his stomach, realizing he'd been an unwitting accomplice to fraud. "Dad, you promised me that Nina was on board with this plan. You said she just needed time to process the decision, and that's why we couldn't talk to her directly about it." "I was protecting all of you," Marcus shouted, his desperation making him sound increasingly unhinged. "Nina's been wasting that property for 3 years, living there like some kind of hermit scientist instead of maximizing its investment potential. Sometimes families have to make tough decisions for the greater good." I confronted each family member with the evidence I'd been gathering. "Mom, did you really think I would agree to destroy Grandma Sarah's house without even discussing it with you? And Jake, Did you honestly believe I would make a major financial decision and not tell my own brother about it?" Patricia broke down, crying, genuinely shocked by the extent of her husband's deception. "I thought you were just being stubborn about the money, Nina. Your father kept saying you'd thank us later when you saw how much profit we could make from a modern development." Jake revealed something that made the situation even worse. "Nina, I need to tell you something. Dad promised me 15% of the development profits to help pay off my gambling debts. I owe some dangerous people over $30,000, and I was desperate enough to believe this was the answer to my problems." The family confrontation was interrupted when another vehicle pulled into the driveway. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows stopped behind the bulldozers, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. Tommy immediately recognized him, and his expression darkened. "That's David Sterling from Coastal Development Corporation. I've worked on his projects before, and there's always something shady about the timelines and paperwork." David Sterling approached our group with practiced corporate charm, completely ignoring the family drama playing out in front of him. "Good morning, everyone. I trust we're ready to begin the exciting transformation of this underutilized oceanfront property." But when Sterling noticed the construction had stopped and Tommy was holding legal documents, his demeanor shifted dramatically. The fake smile disappeared, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who viewed people as obstacles to profit. "What seems to be the problem here?" Sterling demanded, his voice carrying an edge of barely controlled anger. "We have a very tight construction schedule to maintain, and any delays will cost my company significant money." I stepped forward to introduce myself as the property owner, but Sterling cut me off with dismissive arrogance. "Young lady, the adults are handling business matters here. Why don't you let your father explain the family's decision to modernize this property?" That's when Sterling pulled out his phone and made a call that chilled me to the bone. "We have a problem," he said to whoever answered. "The granddaughter is here with legal papers, and the construction crew has stopped work." "Yes, sir, I understand. Activate Plan B immediately." As Sterling finished his call, I overheard him mention something about a backup scheme that was already in motion. My stomach dropped as I realized this conspiracy went far deeper than just my father's greed. Sterling's confident reaction to my legal documents suggested there was another layer to this plot that I hadn't discovered yet. The morning sun climbed higher as I stood there clutching my grandmother's property deed, suddenly understanding that my legal victories might not be enough to stop what was coming next. Sterling's mention of Plan B meant they had anticipated this exact scenario and prepared accordingly. Sterling's backup plan revealed itself within minutes when another convoy of trucks arrived at my property. Unlike Tommy's legitimate construction crew, these vehicles carried specialized equipment for what Sterling called emergency demolitions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling announced with renewed confidence, "I have here an emergency demolition order declaring this structure unsafe for human habitation. According to county regulations, buildings deemed structurally hazardous must be demolished immediately to protect public safety." He produced official-looking engineering reports that were supposedly conducted just hours earlier, complete with structural analysis charts and safety violation codes. The documents claimed my beach house had foundation problems, electrical hazards, and roof damage that posed immediate dangers to anyone nearby. Tommy examined the reports with growing skepticism. "Sir, I was here yesterday doing the preliminary survey, and this house is solid as a rock. These reports are describing damage that doesn't exist anywhere on this property." But Sterling's new construction crew began setting up their equipment despite Tommy's protests and my legal objections. Their foreman, an intimidating man named Frank Morrison, ignored everyone except Sterling and started directing workers to prepare for immediate demolition. "Ma'am, I understand your emotional attachment," Sterling said to me with fake sympathy, "but safety regulations supersede property ownership rights. We're actually doing you a favor by handling the demolition costs instead of forcing you to hire your own contractors." I rushed inside the house to retrieve my marine biology research files, desperate to save 3 years of scientific work before Sterling's crew could destroy everything. As I gathered my documents, I made a discovery that changed everything about this situation. Hidden in my grandmother's old filing cabinet were research papers I'd never seen before. Sarah had been conducting her own environmental studies of our coastline for over 20 years, documenting the health of coral reefs and marine ecosystems directly beneath our property. Her meticulous research proved that our oceanfront land sat above one of the most crucial coral reef ecosystems on the entire Atlantic coast. The reef was home to 3 species of fish that were protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act, and any construction activity would violate multiple environmental protection laws. Even more shocking, I found correspondence between my grandmother and various government agencies from the past decade. Sarah had been quietly fighting Sterling's development company for years, providing scientific evidence that their previous projects had destroyed irreplaceable marine habitats along hundreds of miles of coastline. Suddenly, everything made perfect sense. Sterling wasn't just trying to build another luxury development, he was systematically eliminating the people and properties that threatened to expose his company's environmental crimes. My grandmother's research, combined with my own marine biology work, represented evidence that could send him to prison for decades. As I emerged from the house with boxes of research files, I found that our situation had dramatically changed. Mrs. Eleanor Hamilton, my 78-year-old neighbor, had arrived with a group of local residents who'd heard about the demolition through the community grapevine. "Nina, dear, we're not going to let them destroy your grandmother's house," Eleanor declared with the fierce determination of someone who'd been fighting developers for longer than I'd been alive. "I've been battling Sterling's company for 15 years, and I know exactly what kind of man we're dealing with." Eleanor had brought a petition signed by over 200 community members opposing Sterling's development project. She explained that Sterling had been systematically targeting waterfront properties owned by elderly residents, using legal intimidation and financial pressure to force sales at below-market prices. A local news reporter named Jessica Walsh arrived after receiving what she called an anonymous tip about the illegal demolition. Jessica had been investigating Sterling's business practices for months, documenting a pattern of suspicious building permits and environmental violations across 3 different counties. "Mr. Sterling," Jessica called out while her cameraman began recording, "can you explain why your company is attempting to demolish a private residence without proper environmental impact studies? Our investigation shows this property sits above protected marine habitats." Sterling's polished corporate facade cracked under the sudden media attention. "This is private property business that doesn't concern the general public. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately before I call security to remove you." Meanwhile, the confrontation with my family reached a breaking point as more evidence came to light. Marcus finally admitted he'd been receiving monthly payments from Sterling for over 18 months, totaling nearly $200,000 in what he called consulting fees. "The family business has been struggling since the recession," Marcus confessed with tears in his eyes. "Sterling offered me a way to save everything by facilitating this one development project. I never meant for it to go this far, but once I took his money, he owned me completely." Patricia was horrified by the extent of her husband's deception and financial desperation. "Marcus, you've been lying to me for over a year. How could you risk our daughter's inheritance and our family's reputation for money?" Jake tried to distance himself from the conspiracy, but his own complicity became clear when Eleanor revealed she'd seen him measuring my property and taking photographs for Sterling's company several times over the past month. Just as the situation seemed to stabilize with media attention and community support, a coastal development board official named Robert Chen arrived unexpectedly in a government vehicle. "I'm here to investigate reports of illegal demolition permits and environmental violations," Chen announced while examining the paperwork. Someone filed an anonymous complaint about irregularities in the permitting process for this property. Chen immediately spotted problems with Sterling's emergency demolition order, pointing out missing signatures, invalid approval codes, and dates that didn't match county records. He called for a complete halt to all construction activities, pending a thorough investigation. But Sterling wasn't finished yet. As the crowd of neighbors, reporters, and government officials grew larger, he approached me with a sinister private message that made my blood run cold. "Miss Nina," he said quietly, so only I could hear, "you have exactly 24 hours to sign over this property voluntarily, or you're going to face some very serious consequences. I have information about your research funding that could destroy your scientific career permanently. Don't test me on this." Sterling's threat revealed the true scope of his ruthlessness. This wasn't just about real estate development anymore. He was willing to destroy my entire professional life to get the land, and I suddenly realized I was dealing with someone who had no moral boundaries whatsoever. As Sterling walked back to his sedan, leaving his construction crew to pack up their equipment, I understood that the next 24 hours would determine whether I could save not just my grandmother's house, but my entire future as a marine biologist. I secretly activated my phone's recording app as Sterling made his threats, capturing every word of his intimidation tactics. His admission about having compromising information regarding my research funding would provide federal investigators with crucial evidence of corporate extortion. Within an hour of Sterling's departure, I contacted my research supervisor, Dr. Amanda Torres, at the Marine Science Institute. Amanda's reaction to my situation was completely unexpected and revealed information that changed everything about my understanding of the case. "Nina, I need to tell you something that's been classified until now," Amanda said during our emergency video call. "Federal agents have been investigating Sterling's company for environmental crimes for over 2 years. Your research has been providing crucial evidence without you even knowing it." Amanda explained that my detailed studies of coral reef degradation had been flagged by the Environmental Protection Agency as evidence of systematic ecosystem destruction. My documentation of dead reef zones perfectly matched the locations of Sterling's previous development projects, creating a paper trail that federal prosecutors needed for their case. "The FBI has been waiting for the right opportunity to arrest Sterling," Amanda continued. "Your grandmother's property represents the final piece of evidence they need to prove his company has been deliberately destroying protected marine habitats for profit." While this conversation was happening, reporter Jessica Walsh was broadcasting live from my beach house property. Her news station had picked up the story as breaking news, and within hours, environmental groups across the country were sharing the coverage on social media platforms. The story gained national attention when ocean conservation organizations recognized the scientific importance of the coral reef beneath my property. Social media campaigns supporting my fight against Sterling began trending with hashtags like "Save Nina's Reef" and "Protect Our Oceans," generating thousands of supportive comments from environmental activists nationwide. Sterling's corporate image took a massive hit as Jessica's investigation revealed his company's history of environmental violations. Stock prices for Coastal Development Corporation dropped 15% in a single day as investors learned about the federal investigation and potential criminal charges. Local politicians who had previously supported Sterling's projects suddenly distanced themselves to protect their careers. The mayor called for a comprehensive review of all building permits issued to Sterling's company, and 3 county commissioners demanded immediate environmental impact studies for pending development proposals. The situation escalated dramatically when FBI agents arrived at my property to secure my environmental research as evidence in their federal case. Agent Susan Rodriguez, a serious woman in her 40s, explained that my documentation of coral reef destruction was crucial evidence in a multi-state investigation. "Miss Nina, your research has helped us connect Sterling's company to environmental crimes spanning from Florida to North Carolina," Agent Rodriguez revealed. We've been building a case against him for racketeering fraud and violations of the Clean Water Act. The agents offered me federal protection after learning about Sterling's threats to destroy my career. They explained that Sterling had a history of intimidating scientists and environmental activists who threatened his business interests, sometimes using illegal surveillance and financial manipulation to silence his critics. This federal intervention finally opened my father's eyes to the severity of his situation. Marcus realized he hadn't just been collaborating with a questionable businessman, but with actual criminals who were under federal investigation for organized fraud and environmental destruction. I never knew it would go this far. Marcus sobbed as he watched FBI agents cataloging evidence from Sterling's company. I thought I was just helping facilitate a real estate deal, not participating in environmental crimes that could send me to prison. Patricia made the difficult decision to file for divorce, unable to forgive the depth of Marcus's deception and illegal activities. "I can't be married to someone who would risk our daughter's future for money," she told him through tears. "You've betrayed everything our family stands for." Jake entered a rehabilitation program for gambling addiction and began working with federal investigators to provide information about Sterling's manipulation tactics. He revealed that Sterling had been systematically targeting family members with financial problems using their desperation to facilitate property acquisitions. Community support continued growing as local businesses refused to serve Sterling's corporate representatives and construction crews. Environmental activists established a peaceful protest camp on the public beach adjacent to my property, drawing attention from national conservation organizations. The mayor organized emergency town hall meetings to address Sterling's impact on the local economy and environment. Tourism board members expressed serious concerns about how Sterling's developments were affecting the area's reputation as an environmentally conscious coastal destination. Legal aid organizations offered pro bono support for my case after learning about Sterling's intimidation tactics. 3 different environmental law firms volunteered to represent me without charge, recognizing that my case could set important legal precedents for protecting marine ecosystems. But Sterling's desperation was far from over. Late one evening, his lawyers arrived at the county courthouse attempting to file emergency injunctions that would prevent further investigation of his company's activities. When that failed, Sterling hired private security teams to patrol around my property, claiming he needed to protect his corporate interests. Local police increased their patrols after neighbors reported suspicious vehicles conducting surveillance of my house and Eleanor's property. The FBI warned me that Sterling was becoming increasingly unpredictable as his legal and financial situation deteriorated. That's when the most devastating betrayal occurred. Around midnight on the 3rd day of our standoff, I discovered that someone had broken into my house and destroyed my computer, containing years of irreplaceable research data. Security cameras revealed the shocking truth about who had sabotaged my work. The intruder was Jake, my own brother, who Sterling had secretly paid $5,000 to destroy my research equipment and steal my backup drives. Video footage showed Jake searching through my files and deliberately smashing my laboratory equipment before fleeing through the back door. I realized that Sterling had been manipulating my family members individually, using their personal weaknesses against them to turn them into unwitting weapons against me. Even after Jake had entered rehabilitation and supposedly committed to helping with the federal investigation, Sterling had found a way to exploit his desperate need for money. The discovery that my own brother had betrayed me again, even after witnessing the damage his gambling addiction had caused our family, cut deeper than anything my father had done. I couldn't trust anyone except the federal investigators, and now Sterling had successfully destroyed years of my scientific work, despite all our legal victories. The security footage of Jake breaking into my house was heartbreaking to watch, but it also provided federal investigators with clear evidence of Sterling's witness intimidation tactics. I called Agent Rodriguez immediately, and she arrived within 30 minutes to collect the video evidence and interview me about the break-in. When I confronted Jake about the sabotage, he completely broke down and confessed everything through devastating sobs. Sterling's people had approached him outside his rehabilitation center, threatening to expose his gambling debts to his employer and destroy his chances at recovery unless he helped them one more time. "Nina, I'm so sorry," Jake cried while federal agents recorded his statement. "Sterling said if I didn't destroy your computer, he'd make sure everyone at my job knew about my gambling problems and my connection to this whole mess. I thought I was just delaying your research, not destroying years of work." Jake produced his phone, showing dozens of text messages from Sterling's associates, revealing sophisticated manipulation tactics that exploited his fears about employment, financial security, and family relationships. The messages showed how Sterling had been orchestrating betrayals within my family for months, playing family members against each other with surgical precision. But Jake's confession included information that gave us hope. "Sterling made me take pictures of everything before I destroyed it," he admitted. "He wanted proof that I'd completed the job. I still have all those photos on my phone showing your research data before I deleted the computer files. More importantly, I revealed something that Sterling didn't know. I'd been automatically backing up all my research data to multiple secure cloud servers hosted by the Marine Science Institute. Dr. Torres arrived within hours carrying printed copies of everything I'd lost along with additional research files I'd never seen before. Nina, your grandmother Sarah was collaborating with federal environmental agencies for the last 5 years of her life," Dr. Torres explained, while spreading out decades of research documents. She suspected Sterling was systematically destroying coral reefs and had been documenting evidence that connects his company to environmental crimes across 5 different states. "My grandmother's research proved that Sterling's developments had already destroyed 3 major reef ecosystems worth millions of dollars in environmental value. Her meticulous documentation included water quality measurements, marine life population counts, and photographic evidence showing healthy reefs before Sterling's projects and dead zones afterward. Federal investigators confirmed that Sarah's data, combined with my recent research, connected Sterling to environmental crimes totaling over $40 million in ecosystem damage. The evidence showed Sterling's company had been falsifying environmental impact studies for years, bribing inspectors, and systematically covering up the ecological destruction caused by their developments. Meanwhile, Sterling's corporate empire was collapsing under the weight of multiple investigations. News broke that Sterling's company stock had crashed 60% as investors learned about the federal charges and environmental lawsuits. Bank investigators froze Sterling's corporate accounts pending examination for fraud and money laundering. Sterling's board of directors held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove him as CEO, hoping to distance the company from his criminal activities. Environmental groups filed federal lawsuits seeking over $50 million in damages for ecosystem destruction, spanning 2 decades of Sterling's developments. Multiple contractors came forward revealing that Marcus had been falsifying building permits and environmental clearances for Sterling's projects throughout the region. Marcus's real estate license was permanently suspended, and he faced federal charges for conspiracy fraud and accepting bribes totaling over $300,000. Patricia filed restraining orders against both Marcus and Sterling after learning that Sterling's associates had been following her and monitoring her phone calls. She moved into a small apartment and started attending therapy sessions to process the trauma of discovering her husband's criminal activities. The Coastal Development Board officially revoked all permits for Sterling's beach project and launched a comprehensive investigation of his company's previous approvals. Environmental Protection Agency officials declared my property a protected marine sanctuary, ensuring that no future development could threaten the coral reef ecosystem. Local government voted to rezone the entire coastline as environmentally protected, preventing any commercial development within 500 feet of the water. Tourism actually increased as visitors came to see the preserved reef ecosystem, generating revenue that exceeded Sterling's proposed development profits. My research became the foundation for new marine protection legislation introduced in Congress, with several representatives citing my documentation of corporate environmental crimes as evidence for stronger enforcement penalties. The legislation proposed criminal prosecution for executives who knowingly destroyed protected ecosystems. Reporter Jessica Walsh won several journalism awards for exposing Sterling's environmental conspiracy, and her investigation led to federal charges against corrupt officials in multiple states. Her coverage inspired similar investigations of development companies throughout coastal regions nationwide. But our victory celebration was premature. Sterling had one final desperate move that would put innocent lives in immediate danger and force me to choose between my own safety and protecting the community that had supported me. Late one evening, federal agents lost track of Sterling during his transport to arraignment on federal charges. He'd somehow escaped custody and disappeared, completely sending law enforcement agencies into high alert mode across 3 states. Within hours of his escape, Sterling returned to my neighborhood with a team of armed private security contractors. Local police surrounded the area as Sterling barricaded himself in Eleanor Hamilton's house next door, taking my elderly neighbor hostage and making demands that would test every principle I held dear. Sterling called my phone directly, his voice filled with the desperation of a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. "Nina, you have 30 minutes to bring me the original copies of your grandmother's research and sign over your property rights, or your neighbor is going to pay the price for your stubbornness." Federal agents warned me that Sterling was completely unpredictable in his current mental state, potentially capable of violence against innocent people. I faced an impossible choice between surrendering everything I'd fought for and risking Eleanor's life because of my family's connection to Sterling's crimes. I watched from my deck in absolute horror as Sterling held Eleanor at gunpoint in her own living room, visible through the large front windows that she'd always loved because they provided beautiful ocean views. Eleanor, despite her 78 years and the terrifying situation, maintained remarkable composure and seemed to be trying to calm Sterling down through conversation. FBI negotiator Agent Rodriguez quickly established communication with Sterling using Eleanor's landline phone, but his demands were becoming increasingly erratic and dangerous. Sterling insisted that Nina come to the house alone with all environmental research data in exchange for Eleanor's release, but federal agents couldn't guarantee his mental stability. "I want every single document that your grandmother collected and everything you've researched about coral reefs," Sterling shouted into the phone while pacing around Eleanor's living room. "If I can't build my developments, then nobody's going to have any evidence to use against my company in the future." I secretly coordinated with FBI agents using text messages and hand signals, developing a plan that would protect Eleanor while gathering additional evidence against Sterling. Dr. Torres helped me prepare copies of research data while hiding FBI tracking devices inside the file folders. Agent Rodriguez positioned backup teams around Eleanor's property while maintaining the appearance that I would comply with Sterling's demands. I studied the layout of Eleanor's house, remembering childhood visits when my grandmother and I would bring her homemade cookies and help with her garden. Sterling forced Eleanor to answer the front door while keeping his gun trained on her, a sight that made my heart break for this brave woman who'd spent decades protecting our community from developers like Sterling. Eleanor whispered to me that Sterling had been making frantic phone calls to offshore accounts, apparently trying to arrange immediate transportation out of the country. As I entered the house carrying a briefcase full of research documents, I immediately saw that Sterling was disheveled and desperate, clearly pushed beyond rational thinking by the collapse of his corporate empire and criminal prosecution. Eleanor caught my eye and mouthed the words, "recording device," while pointing toward her kitchen counter. Sterling's confession began almost immediately as his need to justify his actions overcame his criminal instincts. "I've been creating jobs and building beautiful developments for 20 years, he ranted while waving his gun erratically. Environmental regulations are destroying American business and preventing economic growth that benefits everyone. Sterling admitted that he'd been systematically destroying marine ecosystems because environmental protection laws were interfering with profitable development projects. He revealed that government officials in 6 different states had been accepting his bribes to approve construction permits without proper environmental impact studies. Your grandmother was a meddling old woman who didn't understand modern business. Sterling continued, apparently unaware that FBI recording equipment was capturing every word. I tried to buy her property legitimately, but she kept interfering with my regional development plans by collecting worthless scientific data. The most shocking revelation came when Sterling accidentally admitted to pressuring my grandmother through legal intimidation during her final months of life. He'd hired lawyers to file frivolous lawsuits against Sarah, hoping to stress her into selling the property before she could complete her environmental research. Sarah Hamilton was 91 years old and had no business owning valuable coastal property, Sterling said without any trace of remorse. I made sure she understood the financial and legal pressures she was facing, and I would have succeeded if she hadn't been so stubborn about her amateur science experiments. I realized that Sterling's harassment may have contributed to my grandmother's declining health and death, adding emotional weight to my determination to see him face justice for his crimes against both the environment and my family. Eleanor demonstrated incredible courage by pretending to have a medical episode, clutching her chest and gasping for breath in a performance that distracted Sterling long enough for me to signal FBI agents about our positions in the house. Eleanor had secretly activated a panic button installed after previous break-ins, alerting additional law enforcement agencies. While Sterling focused on Eleanor's apparent medical emergency, she guided our conversation toward local coastal history, keeping him calm while subtly moving us toward the kitchen, where there were multiple escape routes and better positions for federal agents to intervene. Agent Rodriguez coordinated a rescue operation through multiple entry points, while Sterling's attention became divided between watching both women and monitoring the increasing law enforcement presence outside. Sterling's desperation peaked when he realized that FBI sharpshooters had surrounded the house. I made a final gambit by pretending to agree to Sterling's demands, signing fake property transfer documents, while secretly activating my phone's recording app to capture his most incriminating admissions. Sterling revealed the locations of offshore bank accounts containing millions of dollars in profits from illegal development projects. His confession included details about bribing congressional representatives to weaken federal environmental protection laws, providing investigators with evidence for prosecuting corruption at the highest levels of government. Sterling's recorded admissions would result in dozens of additional criminal prosecutions spanning multiple states. Just as FBI agents prepared to breach Eleanor's house, Sterling made his most devastating threat yet. He revealed that he'd planted explosives around my beach house that would automatically detonate if he didn't send a cancel code every 60 minutes, ensuring that my home and research center would be destroyed, even if he was captured. I had less than 10 minutes before the next scheduled detonation, and Sterling was the only person who knew the disarmament codes. Even capturing him wouldn't save the house that contained my life's work and my grandmother's environmental legacy, leaving me with an impossible choice between justice and preservation. With FBI bomb technicians racing to locate Sterling's explosives, I made a desperate appeal to whatever humanity remained in Sterling's tortured psyche. I described my grandmother Sarah's genuine love for the ocean and her decades of work protecting marine life that Sterling had systematically destroyed for profit. Mr. Sterling, my grandmother spent 40 years documenting the health of these coral reefs, I said, while Agent Rodriguez and her team prepared for simultaneous intervention. She wasn't trying to hurt your business. She was trying to preserve something beautiful for future generations to enjoy and study. I explained how my marine biology research could actually help restore the reef ecosystems that Sterling's developments had damaged, potentially creating sustainable tourism revenue that exceeded short-term construction profits. We could work together to repair the environmental damage and create something that benefits both the economy and the ecosystem. Eleanor's words provided the breakthrough we desperately needed. Despite being held at gunpoint by a desperate criminal, she offered forgiveness to Sterling that surprised everyone in the room, including the FBI agents monitoring our conversation. "David, I've watched you destroy so many beautiful places along our coast," Eleanor said with gentle strength. "But it's not too late to do something right. You could help save this reef and be remembered for restoration instead of destruction." Sterling's emotional breakdown was complete and sudden. The combination of legal pressure, financial ruin, and unexpected compassion broke through his defensive anger, revealing a man who'd spent decades justifying environmental destruction to himself and others. "I never meant for it to go this far." Sterling sobbed while FBI technicians worked frantically to locate his explosive devices. "I started out just wanting to build beautiful developments, but the profit margins kept demanding more shortcuts and fewer environmental considerations." With less than 2 minutes remaining before the scheduled detonation, Sterling finally provided the disarmament codes to federal agents. FBI bomb technicians successfully located and disabled 3 separate explosive devices hidden around my property's foundation, saving both the house and my research laboratory. Federal agents immediately arrested Sterling on charges, including terrorism kidnapping, environmental destruction fraud, and conspiracy. His complete confession led to arrests of corrupt government officials in 12 states and the recovery of over $30 million in illegal profits hidden in offshore accounts. Sterling's corporate empire collapsed entirely as environmental lawsuits reached $50 million in total damages. International authorities froze his remaining assets and began extradition proceedings for environmental crimes committed in Canadian and Mexican coastal developments. My family's healing process began with Marcus pleading guilty to federal fraud charges and receiving a reduced sentence in exchange for his complete cooperation with ongoing investigations. Court-ordered therapy helped him understand how his financial desperation had led to devastating moral compromises. Patricia rebuilt her life as an advocate for families affected by white-collar crime, using her experience to help other women recognize and escape financial manipulation by their spouses. She testified before Congress about the hidden victims of corporate fraud, advocating for stronger protections for families caught in criminal conspiracies. Jake completed his rehabilitation program and found meaningful work with environmental protection organizations, channeling his guilt about the family crisis into positive activism for marine conservation. His insider knowledge of Sterling's manipulation tactics helped federal investigators understand how corporations target vulnerable individuals. Through family therapy and honest communication, we slowly rebuilt relationships based on truth rather than financial pressure or manipulation. The process was difficult and sometimes painful, but it created stronger bonds than we'd ever had when our interactions were based on hiding problems and avoiding difficult conversations. My professional life flourished beyond anything I'd imagined possible. Nina's research led to the creation of the Sarah Hamilton Federal Marine Sanctuary, protecting the entire coastline where my grandmother had conducted her pioneering environmental studies. Graduate students from universities nationwide came to study at our research center, making my beach house a hub of marine conservation education. The Presidential Environmental Protection Award I received honored both my scientific contributions and my courage in exposing corporate environmental crimes. Dr. Torres and I established the Hamilton Marine Research Institute, providing funding and facilities for young scientists studying coral reef restoration and protection. My grandmother's beach house was transformed into a thriving research center while preserving its original character and the memories that made it special to our family. The wraparound porch where Sarah had collected water samples became a teaching laboratory where students learned to identify marine species and monitor ecosystem health. 5 years later, Eleanor Hamilton was honored by the governor for her bravery during the hostage crisis and her decades of environmental activism. Local tourism flourished as people visited our protected marine sanctuary, generating sustainable revenue that far exceeded Sterling's proposed development profits. The community established an annual environmental protection festival, celebrating the successful preservation of our coastline and the power of grassroots activism to defeat corporate intimidation. Reporter Jessica Walsh's coverage of our story inspired similar environmental protection efforts in coastal communities throughout the United States. Sterling was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, while environmental restoration programs funded by his seized assets worked to repair damaged ecosystems along hundreds of miles of coastline. His case became a landmark prosecution that strengthened environmental protection laws and increased penalties for corporate environmental crimes. Standing on my deck at sunset, I watched dolphins playing in the crystal-clear protected waters, while graduate students collected research samples nearby. The view included healthy coral reefs that would have been destroyed by Sterling's development, now thriving under federal protection and scientific monitoring. I realized that my grandmother's greatest gift wasn't the beach house itself, but the courage to fight for something more valuable than personal profit. Sarah had taught me that true strength comes not from fighting against the people you love, but from loving them enough to demand they become better people. My victory had saved not just a piece of family property, but an entire marine ecosystem, and the soul of a community that refused to let corporate greed destroy their environmental heritage. The beach house that nearly became a luxury development now served as a beacon of hope for environmental protection and family healing. The experience taught me that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with anger or revenge, but with truth, courage, and the willingness to forgive people who've made terrible mistakes. My family emerged stronger and more honest. My community was better protected, and future generations would inherit healthy coral reefs instead of environmental destruction. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who were making decisions that went against your values? How do you balance loyalty to loved ones with doing what you believe is right? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. Don't forget to share this story with friends and family who might need encouragement to stand up for what they believe in. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope you'll carry forward the message that sometimes protecting what you love requires fighting for it with everything you have.